Well, Alan, the last time we were on, we talked about your background and you're being brought up, in a sense, in two worlds.
Yep.
Brought up in the rough Gorbals in Glasgow, but also the beauty of Skye. And the thing that came out of our last conversation for me was the fact of how you spoke of your family worship morning and evening, and how that held you, as it were, from the extremes of maybe all the behaviours you might have got into. And I think the last time you were in your teenage years, you spoke of, that situation. You were going to public worship, I presume, in the Free Church. What then were the steps in which the Lord, in His mercy and grace, brought you to Himself?
I remember distinctly when I was 14, I was brought under conviction of sin. And I knew then the need for conversion. And I remember going to speak to my mother. And my mother at that time wasn't a believer. We brought up in the church, but she was sort of, I wouldn't say horrified, but nervous for me. And she said, you realise that you'll have to go before the session. And the session consisted of my grandfather, great uncles. And I got to confess, when I realised that, I mean, these guys, godly, but, dressed in black, top to toe, and that was it every day of the week. And the thought of at 14 sitting before them, and my mum admitted years later, she says that was the wrong thing to say.
That was the thing of the day, and she wasn't speaking out of her time. That was the reality. You didn't go and sit inside in front of these men with their black suits, and the minister with his 2.5-inch collar, and that was it.
Yeah, and I think also looking back, just the seriousness of the step that you were taking and what it would mean for you in different ways. Not long afterwards, my parents, they basically started to get slack in terms of church attendance and so on. With the result, I wasn't attending as well. Then I think what happened when I was 16, I ended up in hospital for most of the year. Basically, I had lung collapses, both my lungs kept collapsing, and I needed to have pretty major surgery to stop that. And what it meant was, in terms of my future, I hoped I would go to university, but the whole experience in the hospital and so on, I just didn't want to go back to school or wherever. And I ended up working in a place that I'd always dreaded the thought of working in, and that was a factory.
Yeah.
And a place called Allan Motors, which, was a well-respected Scottish company that built trucks and buses, and was now part of what was called the British Leyland Corporation, and that took in all the car manufacturers in the UK and so on. And I ended up there serving my apprenticeship as a fitter turner, and it was just under 4 years. And it's the old story. The first year, the group of boys I was with, it was just party city all the time, and sort of pretty wild lifestyle, and recognizing that bad company does corrupt.
Yeah,
there's no doubt about it.
Very important point, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
I mean, the company that we keep in our lives, especially at that stage in life, has a tremendous bearing on our thinking and our behaviour.
Yep, very much so. And that's how, even with my own children, but even they've said now, they recognise, just bad company, the effect it can have on you.
A fitter turner, you need to give us a wee bit of it. What were you fitting and what were you turning?
Well, basically, in terms of the turning, it would be a metal lathe, and you would be either churning out component parts like axles and so on for trucks. So they're pretty big things and big pieces of machinery you were working with. The fitting mainly was actually working on the assembly line and churning out 22 trucks a day. And then at the end of my apprenticeship, when I became time served, as they called it, I ended up on the assembly line building trucks. When I started the second year of my apprenticeship, and I was 17 by that time, one of my friends had a mobile disco, and he would go to birthday parties, weddings and so on. One of the guys who usually helped him had to drop out, and Ian said, "Can you come?" So there was me at the birthday party. We set up the turntables and I was doing my DJ. And when I was there, I got introduced to this girl. Her name was Allan. And anyway, I liked her and asked her if that night, can I phone you through the week? And she was, yeah, okay. I phoned her on the Sunday. And I thought, you'll have to move fast here. So Sunday night I phoned and we're talking. And then we kid on about this now. For many, even Christian families, you were told, now, if you're going to marry someone, you know, don't marry a Roman Catholic. That was the way you've been brought up.
Yes.
You know, it's going to bring problems for you, and if you have family and so on. So when I'm speaking to Allan, I eventually came to the point where I thought, I don't know. You know, I liked her. I thought, I don't know if she's Protestant or Catholic. And so in Glasgow, the way he found out was, he said, what school did you go to?
Yeah.
I said, what school did you go to? And she said, Christen. Now, of course, that, I thought, whoa, what? I've got no clue.
Yeah.
And I asked her straight out, are you Catholic? And so as the conversation continued, we decided, yeah, we'll go out to the movies. She said, I quite fancy going to see that movie. She says there's nuns in it and so on. And I said, okay. I said, well, I don't fancy that. I says, I'm really into nuns. And she starts to laugh. I says, what's funny? She says, I'm not a Catholic. She says, I'm a Protestant. So she knew, in fact, her people on her mum's side were Ordners Lodge people. I always liked motorcycles. And when I started work, bought my first motorcycle. And so I'd be away often on the motorcycle, just, you know, going here, there and everywhere, even on the Lord's Day.
So that really broke a pattern, didn't it? Family worship was, in a sense, out the window. Observance of the Lord's Day had gone.
That had gone. But again, deep down, I knew if anything's going to happen to you, you know, you're going to go to the wrong place if you depart this world and haven't bowed to Christ. So we were going out with each other. And the only problem, I shouldn't say problem, while my parents had stopped going to church, they were still pretty strict in terms of the Sunday, the Lord's Day. And I had to say to Allan, look, I can see you every day of the week, but I said, just forget the Sunday. I said, it's going to cause too much hassle at home for me. The interesting thing was, and again, in God's providence, it's amazing. She'd started work in a company in Glasgow, a typesetting company. And her boss was a Christian. And he used to, at lunchtime, read the Bible to her.
Wow.
And pray. And he'd been trying to get her, you know, introduced to some young men he knew who were Christians and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And his name was Hamish. And he really had a burden for her soul.
Mm-hmm.
So because of that, she had a sort of understanding of, believe it or not, where I was coming from about the Sunday. Yeah. So it was going on for about 6 months or so. I was getting fed up with this on the Sunday, not seeing her, although I would go out on the bike. So I hit on the great idea, as I thought, just 5 minutes away from where I lived, there was a local Baptist church. And I thought, if we start going to church, they can't complain. So I said to Alice, what do you think about starting to go to church? And I says, and then we can do what we want the rest of the Sunday. I mean, it was totally utilitarian. She said, okay. So I would get up, drive over to the other side of Glasgow, ride over, pick her up, and then we would come back and we'd go to church. And after the service was over, then we would just head off in the motorcycle and just do our own thing. At the time, it was Knightswood Baptist Church. They were vacant, and it was a team ministry with their deacons. Well, as we kept attending, I was beginning to come under conviction of sin. And Alison and I would talk about it, and her boss, you know, what he'd been teaching her, we both knew that, you know, there's something that we need to do.
Yes.
So there was one Sunday evening, we started to then go out, not just the morning, but the evening as well. And there was a good group of young people that we started to get involved with. And then there was this Sunday night, God had been speaking to me. And I left the church that night and I thought, I really got to do something. And I should do it sooner rather than later. But that week, just getting back to work and things just seemed to disappear. Well, the Friday of that week, I ended up in a really bad motorcycle accident and I ended up in hospital. And I can still remember this. I'd been knocked out and I was starting to come to, and I was thinking, okay, what's happened? I thought, yeah, you've been in an accident. I could figure that out. And then the first thought came into my mind after that, am I dead? And then I thought, if I'm dead, I'm in hell.
Mm-hmm.
I was terrified to open my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And I slowly opened my eyes. And I've never been so thankful to see ceiling lights. And I went, wow, life. I eventually got out of the hospital. And within about 2 months after that, I was converted. The funny thing was, even during that point, the one who had seemed to be making bigger strides and being more determined to, hopefully come to that point was Alison. And she was totally surprised. It was me that one night said to the guy who was preaching, can I speak with you? And she came through with me, and that night in front of her, I prayed and repented and became a Christian. So I was, 19 years of age at that point. So we'd been out with each other for about 2 years.
We just shows the power of God's word and the mercy of God, that he even used the situation of you wanting just to see Alison on a Sunday to bring you under the sound of the gospel.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is, now it's coming back to my memory, it's been so long ago, but I remember even as a teenager, I didn't want to marry a complete unbeliever.
Yes.
I wanted someone who at least would believe in God.
Yeah.
Whatever came after that. Within a month, Alison was soundly converted. Because we'd both come to the point, and she even knew, she said, if you remain a Christian and I don't become a Christian, she says, we really need to split up. Well, I said, I know. And within a month, she was soundly converted, and over that year, it became through various things that it was her conversion. She wasn't just saying she was converted so she could stay with me, as it was genuine. So Alison would be 18, I was 19, and we got fairly involved in the local church and so on.
It's a tremendous, again, testimony of the Lord's working power. I mean, it's just that,
yeah,
bringing you to, it's an amazing thing when he brings an individual from death to life. It's no wonder that the angels rejoice in heaven at that reality.
I think I even say to the folk here in Toronto that I think we've lost sight somehow, or maybe a little, of the miracle of the new birth.
Yes.
What actually happens.
Yes.
And what the Lord does graciously.
The expectation of that in people. And I mean, I think that, we've got to prayerfully desire that God will bring people into our midst who are going to be different. They're not going to be perfect. They're going to have issues, but under the sound of the preaching of the gospel, that they be converted.
Yeah. Yeah,
absolutely.
Very much so, Andrew.
That's been good. I've enjoyed that. We'll take the story a bit further and hear how then you move from your conversion into the ministry.
All right.
Okay. So thank you for today.
Thank you.